The siren isn't a test this time. You grab your phone. The emergency alert says shelter in place, 18 minutes until impact. You're in Seattle. Tech hub, deep water port, military logistics corridor. You check the government app. It tells you to go to your basement, seal the windows, wait for the all clear. Here's what it doesn't tell you. Your city is on the primary target list. Population over 750,000. Critical infrastructure. Pacific Fleet support facilities. The blast radius is 8 miles. The fallout plume covers 200. And the relocation advice you've been given your entire life is designed to keep you exactly where you are. Stationary and compliant. But here's what they buried. There are 5 countries where World War III targeting doctrine mathematically excludes them. They're not illegal to move to. They're not secret. They're just not advertised. And today, you're learning why geography, neutrality, and strategic irrelevance make you untouchable when the missiles fly. Every prepper form, every government website, every civil defense manual tells you the same lie. Shelter in place. Stock 72 hours of food and water. Seal your windows with plastic sheeting. Move to your basement. Wait for the all-clear signal. You think you're building a survival plan. You're not. You're building a tomb with a 3-day supply of canned beans. Here's what they don't tell you in the big bold letters on the FEMA website. Modern nuclear targeting doctrine doesn't care about your basement. It doesn't care about your duct tape. It cares about maximizing strategic damage with minimum warhead expenditure. And if you're in a city with more than 500,000 people, you're already on the list. Population centers over 1 million. Deep water ports, military air bases, data centers, power generation facilities. Logistics hubs. These aren't potential targets. They're primary targets. Let's talk about the math. A standard nuclear warhead, 475 kilotons, creates a fireball with a radius of 1.5 miles. Everything inside vaporizes. The thermal radiation extends 8 miles. Third-degree burns on every exposed surface. The blast wave reaches 12 miles. Reinforced concrete buildings collapse. Your basement, it's not rated for that. And even if you somehow survive the initial strike, you've got a bigger problem. Fallout. The radiation plume from a single ground burst covers 200 square miles within 24 hours. Lethal dose zones extend 30 miles downwind. You're not sheltering for 72 hours. You're sheltering for 6 months, and your food supply runs out in 3 days. Your water, contaminated. Your air filtration, non-existent. But here's the real problem. In a sustained conflict, they don't stop at one strike. Secondary targeting doctrine hits infrastructure systematically. Power grids go dark to prevent military logistics. Communication networks get severed. Transportation hubs destroyed. Food distribution centers gone. The goal isn't just to eliminate military capacity, it's to prevent recovery. Your city isn't getting rebuilt. It's getting written off. So, why does every government preparedness page tell you to shelter in place? Because the alternative is 50 million people trying to evacuate simultaneously. The highways gridlock. Panic spreads. Civil order collapses before the strike even lands. The government's job isn't to save you. It's to maintain order and minimize liability. Shelter-in-place directives keep you stationary, keep you calm, and keep you off the roads. It's population management disguised as survival advice. Historical precedent proves this. Remember duck and cover drills from the Cold War? School children hiding under desks during nuclear attack simulations. That wasn't protection. A desk doesn't stop gamma radiation. It doesn't shield you from a pressure wave traveling at 1,000 miles per hour. Those drills were psychological conditioning. They gave the population a sense of control, a belief that survival was possible, so they wouldn't panic when tensions escalated. The strategy wasn't saving lives, it was preserving social stability until the bombs dropped. You've been sold compliance wrapped in preparedness language, and if you stay where you are, in a target zone with a basement full of supplies and a false sense of security, you're not prepared. You're just easier to count when the casualty estimates get calculated. The answer isn't better bunkers, it's better geography. And there are exactly 5 places on Earth where the math of modern warfare makes you invisible to targeting computers. The first country isn't hidden. It's just 9,000 miles from anything worth bombing. New Zealand. Here's why distance plus irrelevance equals invisibility. New Zealand sits 1,200 miles southeast of Australia. The nearest major conflict zone, Asia, is 6,000 miles away. Europe, 11,000. North America, 7,000. In nuclear targeting doctrine, distance matters because warheads have delivery costs. ICBMs prioritize high-value targets within range. Wasting a missile on a remote island with zero strategic threat is tactically irrational. Strategic irrelevance is the second layer. No NATO obligations, no nuclear weapons, no significant military-industrial targets. The Defense Force is 15,000 personnel. No aircraft carrier ports, no ICBM silos, no radar stations threatening adversary capabilities. Targeting computers calculate based on strategic value and threat level. New Zealand scores near zero on both. Bombing it achieves nothing. It's a warhead wasted. Physics makes it safer. Even in total nuclear exchange, atmospheric circulation protects the southern hemisphere. Fallout particles follow wind currents. The Hadley cells and trade winds that govern global air movement create a natural barrier at the equator. Radioactive debris from northern hemisphere strikes stays north for months before significant cross-equatorial drift. New Zealand's latitude, 37 to 47 degrees south, places it well outside the primary fallout zone. The wind blows the wrong direction for contamination to reach it. Resource independence seals it. New Zealand produces 320% of the food it consumes. Net exporter of dairy, meat, produce, enough to feed its 5 million people 3 times over. Renewable energy accounts for 82% of electricity generation, hydro and geothermal plants that don't require fuel imports. Water is abundant from rainfall and aquifers. No dependence on foreign energy. No food imports required. When global supply chains disintegrate, New Zealand functions independently. Political stability is built into the structure. Functional democracy since 1856, uninterrupted. Low corruption, rule of law. Institutions that hold under pressure. Historical proof. World War II. New Zealand was untouched. Cold War. When superpowers had 10 times the warheads needed to end civilization, New Zealand wasn't on the target list. Geographic isolation plus strategic irrelevance equals survival. But distance alone isn't enough. You need to be so irrelevant that even desperate commanders have no reason to waste a warhead on you. The second country has 380,000 people and no army. It's never needed one. Iceland. Here's how being useless makes you bulletproof. Iceland is a NATO member, but it has zero offensive military capability. No standing army, no navy, no air force. Just a coast guard with a few patrol boats and helicopters. The entire defense apparatus exists to rescue fishermen and enforce maritime boundaries. That's it. In military terms, Iceland poses no threat to anyone. It can't project power. It can't host offensive operations. It's strategically worthless, and that's exactly why it's safe. Nuclear targeting doctrine operates on return on investment. Every warhead has an opportunity cost. Commanders allocate missiles based on what each target eliminates: an airbase, a submarine pen, a command center, a logistics hub. Bombing Iceland achieves nothing. It doesn't remove enemy capability. It doesn't prevent retaliation. It's a wasted missile that could have hit a real target. The math doesn't justify it. Geographic harshness adds a second layer. Iceland is a volcanic island in the North Atlantic. Harsh weather, limited infrastructure, minimal population density. Even if a hostile power wanted to invade for strategic positioning, the terrain makes it a nightmare. It's not worth the resources. During World War II, British and later American forces occupied Iceland, but only as a stopover point for Atlantic convoys. Nobody bombed it. It had no value as a target. It was just a refueling station. Distance from major conflict zones seals it. Europe is 1,000 miles away. Russia, 1,800 miles. North America, 2,400 miles. Fallout patterns from continental strikes miss it entirely. So why doesn't every government website list safe haven countries like Iceland and New Zealand? Because 10 million high earners researching relocation creates capital flight. Tax revenue disappears. Skilled workers leave. Recruitment pools shrink. The information exists, but it's not marketed. You have to dig for it. But distance and irrelevance aren't the only layers of protection. There's a third layer that's even more powerful, and it's not on a map. It's written into international law. The third layer of protection isn't on a map. It's written into international law. Neutrality isn't weakness. It's armor made of treaties. Here's how it works. Neutral nations legally commit to non-participation in military conflicts. They don't join alliances. They don't host foreign military bases. They don't take sides. In exchange, international law protects them. The Geneva Conventions establish neutral rights. Attacking a neutral nation without provocation is a war crime. It triggers diplomatic consequences, turns other neutrals hostile, and hands the enemy a propaganda victory. In military terms, it's a bad trade. Historical precedent proves this works. World War I, Switzerland stayed neutral, surrounded by warring powers on all sides, never invaded. World War II, Sweden maintained neutrality. Switzerland, Ireland, Spain, all untouched. Not because they were feared, because attacking them was politically costly and strategically unnecessary. Commanders want clean enemy lists. Neutrals complicate the battlefield. They create ambiguity. They force diplomatic calculations that slow decision-making. In modern warfare, where speed and clarity matter, neutrality makes you a variable nobody wants to deal with. And here's the critical part. Neutrality still functions today because it reduces friction. It gives all sides a place to negotiate. A country that isn't shooting at anyone. A node that stays open when everything else closes. Switzerland hosts peace talks. Neutral nations facilitate prisoner exchanges. They're more useful alive than destroyed. This isn't theory. It's pattern. Countries that institutionalize neutrality deeply, that build it into their constitutions and foreign policy for generations, create a protective layer that's more reliable than any defense treaty. Two nations have perfected this. They've made neutrality so fundamental to their identity that even in total war, bombing them breaks more than it gains. Let's start with the most famous example. A country that's been neutral since 1815, survived 2 world wars without a single invasion, and built a financial system that makes bombing it economically suicidal. Switzerland. 209 years of armed neutrality, 0 invasions. Here's how a landlocked country surrounded by World War II combatants on all sides, stayed untouched. Swiss neutrality was formalized in 1815 with the Treaty of Paris, signed after the Napoleonic Wars. The major European powers recognized Switzerland as permanently neutral territory. That wasn't charity. It was strategic calculation. Switzerland sits at the crossroads of Europe. Making it neutral created a buffer zone, a place where competing powers could interact without triggering war, and Switzerland has defended that status ever since. But here's the key. Swiss neutrality isn't passive. It's armed neutrality. Every able-bodied male serves in the military. Mandatory service. After active duty, they keep their rifles at home and remain in the reserves until age 50. The Swiss military maintains fortified positions throughout the Alps. Hidden artillery installations built into mountainsides. Bridge demolition charges ready to detonate. Collapsing infrastructure to prevent invasion routes. Tunnel defenses that turn the entire country into a fortress. The doctrine is simple. We won't attack you, but if you attack us, you'll bleed for every mile. World War II proved this works. Hitler had invasion plans. Operation Tannenbaum. The Wehrmacht drew up detailed strategies to take Switzerland, but they never executed. 2 reasons. First, the terrain. The Alps are a defender's dream. Narrow passes, limited roads, fortified positions with overlapping fields of fire. The Swiss military estimated they could hold for months, inflicting massive casualties. Second, and more important, the banks. Swiss financial institutions held Nazi gold. They held assets for the Allies. They held accounts for neutral parties and private citizens across Europe. Bombing Switzerland meant losing access to the financial system that all sides needed. It was more valuable intact than destroyed. That calculus still applies. Switzerland remains neutral. Not in NATO, not in the EU military framework. Still fortified, still armed, and still the banking hub of the world. Post-war recovery requires functional financial infrastructure. Everyone needs Swiss banks after a conflict. Destroying them achieves nothing. Civil defense infrastructure makes it even more resilient. Switzerland has bunker capacity for 114% of its population. That's legally mandated. Every building constructed since the Cold War includes blast-proof shelters, stockpiles of food, water, medical supplies, stored in underground facilities across the country, nuclear fallout protection built into the national architecture. Nuclear targeting computers analyze strategic value. Switzerland has no military bases threatening adversaries, no nuclear weapons, no offensive capability. Bombing it gains nothing tactically. Preserving it maintains a neutral node for post-conflict negotiation and financial continuity. The math doesn't support wasting a warhead. Switzerland proves that neutrality plus preparation equals untouchability. But there's one country that took neutrality even further. They don't just refuse to fight. They constitutionally abolished their military. Costa Rica abolished its army in 1948. It's been safer ever since. Here's why having zero military makes you invisible to war planners. In 1948, after a brief civil war, Costa Rica wrote a new constitution. Article 12 dissolved the military. Army, Navy, Air Force, all gone. The defense budget was redirected to education and healthcare. And the logic was brilliant. A weak military makes you a target. You can't defend yourself effectively, but you might resist just enough to be annoying. Invading you is easy, but occupying you costs resources. A country with no military is different. You're a non-combatant. Attacking you yields zero tactical advantage. No bases to capture. No weapons stockpiles to seize. No military infrastructure to neutralize. You're just civilians and schools. Bombing you achieves nothing except international condemnation. Geographic position helps. Costa Rica sits in Central America, thousands of miles from major conflict zones. Europe, Asia, the Middle East, all far away. No territorial disputes with neighbors. Nicaragua to the north, Panama to the south, both stable enough to act as buffers. The region isn't a strategic flashpoint. Modern Costa Rica thrives on this model. Ecotourism, education, political stability. It invests in quality of life instead of defense spending. And it works because nobody sees it as a threat. But here's why. You've never seen this information compiled on a government website. High earners. Research in New Zealand residency or Uruguayan visas represent tax revenue loss. Brain drain. Capital flight. The State Department wants skilled workers staying domestic for recruitment pools and economic stability. Think tanks don't publish safe haven guides because it undermines alliance narratives and triggers financial panic. The information exists in embassy websites and expat forums, but it's not marketed. You have to dig. You've got distance, irrelevance, neutrality, and demilitarization. 4 layers of protection. But there's one final country that combines all of these and adds one more element. It's so remote that even in total civilizational collapse, it remains self-sufficient. The 5th country isn't the most remote. It's the most accessible. Uruguay. Here's why 3.5 million people, stable democracy, and 0 strategic value makes it the most practical safe haven on this list. Uruguay sits on the southeastern coast of South America. Small population, 3.5 million people. No significant military-industrial infrastructure. No nuclear program. No NATO obligations. No major alliance commitments. In strategic terms, it's irrelevant. There's nothing to bomb. No bases threatening adversary capabilities. No weapons production. No forward operating positions. Attacking Uruguay achieves nothing tactically. It's just farmland, beaches, and a capital city with good internet. Political stability is built into the structure. Uninterrupted democracy since 1985. That's 40 years of peaceful transitions of power. Low corruption, consistently ranked the least corrupt nation in Latin America. Functional institutions that don't collapse when pressure hits. Rule of law that actually functions. This isn't a fragile state propped up by foreign aid. It's stable on its own merits. Resource independence seals it. Uruguay is an agricultural powerhouse. Beef, soybeans, rice, all exported in surplus. The country produces far more food than it consumes. Renewable energy dominates the grid. 95% of electricity comes from wind and hydro. No dependence on imported fuel. Water is abundant. The Guarani Aquifer sits beneath the country, one of the largest freshwater reserves on the planet. When global supply chains disintegrate, Uruguay keeps functioning. It doesn't need external inputs to feed its population or power its infrastructure. Geographic safety adds another layer. Southern Hemisphere, which means atmospheric fallout from Northern Hemisphere. Nuclear exchanges largely misses it. No active fault lines, so earthquakes aren't a threat. Mild climate, no hurricanes, no extreme weather disasters that collapse infrastructure. Stable coastline, no tsunami risk. The geography just works. No enemies. Uruguay has stayed neutral in every major conflict. No territorial disputes with Brazil or Argentina. Good relations with neighbors. Not involved in cartel violence like Mexico or Colombia. The drug war doesn't touch it. No insurgencies, no separatist movements. It's politically boring, and that's exactly what makes it safe. But here's why it's the most actionable option on this list. You can actually move there. Residency pathways exist. Investor visa requires you to purchase property or make a business investment. The threshold is low compared to other countries, around $370,000 in real estate or a business. Rentista visa requires proof of stable income, roughly $1,500 per month from pensions, investments, or remote work. That's achievable for a lot of people. You don't need $1 million in assets. You don't need a PhD. You just need stable income or enough capital to buy a small property. Spanish helps, but it's not mandatory for residency paperwork. You can navigate the process in English with a lawyer. The bureaucracy is slow, but it's functional. Cost of living is reasonable. Montevideo, the capital, runs $100 to $2,500 per month for a comfortable lifestyle. That includes rent, food, utilities, transportation, healthcare. Outside the capital, it's cheaper. You can live well on a modest budget. Infrastructure is modern. Montevideo has fiber internet, speeds comparable to major U.S. cities. International airport with direct flights to Europe, North America, and regional hubs. Healthcare system is ranked higher than the United States in efficiency and outcomes. Public and private options available. Expat communities exist, especially from Argentina, Brazil, and Europe. So you're not completely isolated if you don't speak fluent Spanish immediately. Real estate ownership is straightforward. Foreigners can buy property without restrictions. No residency requirement to own land or a house. You can purchase before you move, secure a foothold, then apply for residency from a position of stability. But here's what the State Department won't tell you. This option exists right now. Uruguay doesn't restrict immigration aggressively. It wants skilled workers, retirees with stable income, and foreign investment. But if 5 million Americans started researching Uruguayan residency tomorrow, that's a brain drain crisis. High earners leaving means tax revenue disappears. Skilled labor evaporates. Military recruitment pools shrink. The information exists on embassy websites and in expat forums, but it's never compiled into a government-sponsored safe haven guide. Because advertising an exit creates capital flight, and capital flight destabilizes the domestic economy. This is the most actionable option because you don't need extraordinary wealth or connections. You need information, a plan, and the willingness to act before the sirens start. 5 countries. 5 different mechanisms of safety. But let's step back and look at the pattern. Why does this information exist in obscure expat forums and embassy websites, but never on government preparedness pages or mainstream news? Let's talk about why good information gets buried. It's not conspiracy. It's incentive structure. The pattern is clear. Safe haven relocation information exists. Embassy websites list residency requirements. Expat forums compare visa pathways. Immigration lawyers specialize in these exact processes. But you'll never see a government-sponsored guide titled Top 5 Countries to Escape WW3. You'll never see CNN running segments on New Zealand residency requirements or Uruguayan investor visas. The information is available, but it's not aggregated. It's not marketed. You have to dig. Here's why. Tax base erosion. High earners. Researching international relocation represent potential revenue loss. Governments want citizens earning domestically, paying taxes domestically, spending money in the domestic economy. If 100,000 skilled professionals start seriously researching Uruguay, that's billions in tax revenue walking out the door over a decade. Brain drain. Engineers, doctors, Programmers, skilled tradespeople. If they leave, you've got workforce gaps. The State Department wants those people staying put, contributing to the domestic economy, filling critical infrastructure roles. Mass emigration pre-conflict weakens everything. Military recruitment. The Department of Defense requires a domestic population for draft scenarios. If 5% of military-age adults relocate internationally before tensions escalate, your recruitment pool shrinks. Preparedness means having bodies available when conscription becomes necessary. Economic stability. If even 2% of the population started serious relocation research tomorrow, housing markets destabilize. Capital flight accelerates. Financial institutions panic. Governments need population stability to maintain economic function. So the information exists, but it's kept fragmented. Residency lawyers know. Expat communities share it in private forums. Embassy websites have the paperwork. But mainstream media doesn't compile it into digestible guides, because that triggers exactly the outcomes governments want to prevent. But here's the thing. You can research this right now. You can look up visa requirements. You can visit these countries. You can establish backup plans. The information isn't classified. It's just not advertised. What other safe havens exist? What residency paths have you found? Drop it in the comments. The more we share, the more options we build collectively. Geography doesn't care about your passport. Physics doesn't care about your lease. And survival doesn't require permission. It only requires information and action.